Eastern Afghanistan was no place for hesitation. The mountains, dry and jagged like the teeth of a sleeping beast, had swallowed patrols before. To the locals, the valley was cursed. To the men who'd fought in it, it was a graveyard. The U.S. military maps marked it as Sector 7G, but the Afghan villagers called it the Dead Via Narrow. V-shaped canyon with limited cover, poor radio reception, and a reputation for being a one-way trip. Senior Chief Petty Officer Marcus Hawley had heard the stories. He wasn't the type to believe in curses, but he respected history, and he respected terrain. This was his 11th deployment. He'd learned long ago that the mountains didn't care who you were, how many stripes you had, or what flag you saluted. If they wanted to, they'd take you. His team moved in under cover of darkness. 6 men, no more. Each carried everything they needed and nothing they didn't. Their mission was straightforward. Infiltrate, observe, report. No engagement, no grandstanding. Just quiet eyes on a suspected weapons pipeline moving through Taliban territory. HQ had reason to believe a large-scale weapons transfer was taking place over the next 72 hours. The SEALs were to watch, mark positions, and prep coordinates for a potential strike or allied joint op. They'd inserted 2 nights earlier via Chinook, low and fast, skimming treetops like a whisper, before landing on a barren ridge 6 clicks from the observation site. From there, they hiked, silently. The crunch of boots on gravel and the distant bark of dogs in the villages below were the only sounds. Once they reached the lip of the valley, Hawley signaled to hold. Below them, the V opened wide like a dry throat. A narrow dirt path snaked down through the center, flanked by cliffs and broken stone. To the untrained eye, it looked empty, dead. But through Hale's scope, life moved beneath the surface. Dust trails from old Toyota pickups. A plume of smoke from what looked like a cooking fire. Men armed, alert, watching. They weren't villagers. They weren't even trying to hide. Taliban. All right, muttered Petty Officer Jake Renner, the team's spotter and sharpshooter. And they've got friends. Hawley didn't reply. He was watching a group of 6 men unloading long crates from a mule-drawn cart into a rock-covered dugout. He knew the shape of weapons crates, the way they were handled, carried like coffins. That was the cache. He called the position in via encrypted burst no voice, just coordinates and sitrep. Command received it and sent back 2 words. Observe. Only Renner adjusted his scope. We're ghosts, huh? Hawley nodded. Until we're not. The SEALs dug in. Small camouflage nets were stretched between rocks. Movement was minimized. Water sipped, not gulped, rations chewed silently. Every noise risked detection. The Taliban weren't stupid. They had scouts in the hills, and in these parts, even. Children knew the sound of foreign boots. By noon the next day, heat waves danced across the rocks. The SEALs rotated watch in shifts. They observed at least 20 fighters coming and going. 1 truck was loaded with crates and disappeared north. The others remained, seemingly awaiting something, maybe more cargo. Maybe a buyer. Still, no orders to engage. That night, Hawley listened to the wind. It sounded different here, almost hollow. Like the mountains were waiting for something too. On day 2, the first problem appeared. A boy, maybe 13, riding a mule. He wasn't armed. He wasn't moving quickly. Just a local herder passing through until he looked up. He stopped cold, staring at Hale's position. Hawley didn't move. The others froze, eyes locked. Seconds passed. The boy turned the mule. Kicked it, hard. Nope, Renner whispered, leveling his rifle. Hall grabbed his arm. No. The boy disappeared around a bend. Bad move, Chief, Renner said grimly. I'm not shooting a kid. He's not a kid now. He's a radio. 10 minutes later, the ridgeline cracked with the sharp pop-pop-pop of a cave fire. Dust exploded near the SEALs' overwatch position. Rocks shattered. Contact, northeast. Someone shouted. They rolled. Into position, answering with tight, controlled return fire. Hale spotted muzzle flashes and marked them. The Taliban weren't charging. They were probing, testing their defenses. They knew someone was up here now. The herder had done his job. Hal tried comes again. Static. A burst went out, but he didn't know if it landed. Another round of gunfire danced over their position. A shot pinged off Renner's scope. He didn't flinch. We're exposed. They've got the elevation advantage if they flank left. Then we don't let them flank, Hale said. We hold the ridge. He dug deeper behind a rock, scanning. More fighters were appearing. Maybe a dozen, maybe more. Coming from both sides. Of the V, they weren't committing yet. Just maneuvering. This wasn't a random attack. It was coordinated. And that meant trouble. Because if the Taliban were planning a large weapons move through the valley, they'd protect it. They wouldn't allow American eyes, especially not SEALs, to report back. And worst of all, the SEALs were now off script. This wasn't just observation anymore. This was survival. As the sun dipped behind the cliffs, casting the dead V in long shadows, Hale reviewed their ammo counts. Low, but not dire. Yet, he tried the radio again. Static. A faint burst reply came through it. Was garbled, but 2 words were clear. No support. The dead V was never truly silent, but now it screamed with tension. The wind carried voices low, foreign, and urgent, echoing through the canyon like ghosts arguing. Somewhere down below, maybe 50 meters from the SEALs' ridge, a Taliban scout called out. The response was sharp. Not panic, not fear. Orders. They were organizing. Senior Chief Marcus Heil ducked behind a jagged slab of shale, sweat trailing down his back beneath the body armor. His team fanned out in the narrow ridgeline perch they'd chosen defensible, but not invincible. Certainly not made to hold off a prolonged assault. Certainly not for 6 men. Contact left, Renner whispered into comms, eyes behind the scope. Movement in the brush. At least 4, maybe 5. Hale crawled forward on his elbows to get a clearer view. His optics cut through the early twilight haze. The figures below were hugging the terrain, shifting from one rock to another in short burst strained movements, not amateur hour. These weren't just grunts with rifles. These were fighters who knew the land and how to use it. Confirmed. They're fanning out, looking to get above us, Hale said. They flank. We're boxed. Another voice cut in over the team comes petty. Officer Samir Basri, the Comes and Crypto Man, originally from New Jersey, but with roots deep in Lebanon. Radio confirms our last burst went through, Chief. FOB got it. Response? Negative on air support. Assets tied up 2 provinces west. Best they can do is a bird in 4 hours. Maybe. Hale clenched his jaw. 4 hours in this valley, without air or backup, might as well be a lifetime. He glanced toward the east, where the path down the ridge led to a narrow funnel. Their exfil point should it come to that. Unless we get flushed, we're staying put, Hale said. But if they get elevation on us, we move. Last resort. Only. No one replied, but that was the way of his team. Quiet professionals. Trust lived in the silence between orders. Below, gunfire broke the stillness. Short, controlled bursts. AKs. Then came the whistling snap of bullets. A sound too familiar to every man on the ridge. Snap. Crack. Snap. Rounds zipped overhead, some punching into the rocks. A shot shattered part of the slab near Basri's cover, sending shards of stone into his helmet. He cursed, but didn't flinch. Contact, Renner shouted. 3, no 4 targets. Moving right. Return fire, Halle barked. The team opened up, answering with M4 South and suppressed bursts from Renner's Mk-13. The mountain lit up in flashes of orange and fire. Halle fired 2 rounds, dropped a figure scrambling behind a rock, and quickly shifted his scope. Another popped up. Firing wildly, he dropped 2 dots still. The enemy advanced. Slower, more cautiously, but with intent. One of them, halfway up the slope, stopped and raised a small radio. Halle saw it clearly in the scope. A field radio he was coordinating, which meant more were coming. They wanted this ridge, and they knew exactly where the SEALs were. 20 minutes later, the sun fully dipped, and with it came a cruel shift in the battle. A mortar thumped from somewhere down the valley, followed by a high-pitched whine overhead. "Mortar!" Renner yelled, and the team ducked. The round hit just behind them, kicking up dirt and stone. A second one followed closer. Dust choked the air. Where the hell did they get a mortar team up here? Basri yelled as he dragged Ortiz, the team's heavy gunner, into cover. They planned for something. Halle muttered dot. Then came the crackle of an RPG.FWW-0000S. The boom. The explosion rattled the ridge. Shrapnel screamed past Renner's arm, ripping into a rock just inches from his elbow. Hale's mind went into overdrive. This wasn't a spontaneous skirmish. This was layered, coordinated. They'd walked into a trap, and the enemy wanted prisoners or corpses. Maybe both. He didn't. Allow the thought to settle. Collapse formation. Pull back 10 meters. Regroup at fallback marker Echo. Halle ordered. One by one, the team crawled and sprinted through dirt and debris. They repositioned along a higher curve of the ridge with marginally better visibility. Ortiz groaned. He'd taken shrapnel in the left shoulder. Basri was all ready, applying gauze and a coagulant, working fast. Ortiz gritted his teeth, nodded once. Still in the fight. "Damn right you are," Halle said. A new volley of gunfire raked the rocks in front of them. "We've got to call again," Basri said. "This situation's escalating." Halle nodded, keying his mic. "Bravo 01 to command. We are under sustained contact. Hostiles coordinated. Mortar and RPG confirmed. No safe egress. We need air support." He released the mic. Waited dot nothing dot, that a broken burst came through barely legible. "Understood. Unable to dispatch? Hold position." "Hold." The signal dissolved into static. Halle exhaled slowly. "That's a no." Basri's expression was hard. "They just told us to ride it out." Halle didn't answer, because they had an hour passed. The enemy shifted tactics. Less shooting, more movement. The fighters were attempting to box them in, likely waiting for full dark to press an assault from above. The SEALs had NVGs, but so did some of the Taliban. The rules of night no longer favored them. Renner passed a water bottle to Hall. "They're baiting us to move. They want us off this ridge," Halle replied. "Force us into that funnel below." "Ambush city?" "Exactly. So what's the play, Chief?" Halle checked the ridge once more, then looked out over the valley. From this height, he could see the faint flickers of firelight below enemy positions, clustered in a half-circle. If they waited much longer, they'd be encircled, but he wasn't about to walk into a trap just because command was overwhelmed. "We hold," Halle said finally. "We hold this ground. We don't break. Not yet." Renner nodded, then turned back to his scope. A long silence followed, interrupted only by the wind, the soft hiss of med kits, and the click of magazines being reloaded. They were tired, dirty, outnumbered and completely on their own. The hours crawled. Night had swallowed the valley whole. Darkness in the dead V was not the absence of light. It was a suffocating presence. The shadows moved. The rocks whispered. Every gust of wind could be mistaken for a fighter creeping. Too close. Senior Chief Marcus Hawley didn't blink as he scanned the perimeter through night vision goggles, his breath slow and controlled. The cold had come hard after sunset, turning sweat into ice under armor. Dirt coated their faces. Blood smeared their sleeves. The air stank of sulfur, burnt metal, and fear tightly restrained. They hadn't fired in over 30 minutes, not because the enemy was gone, but because the enemy was waiting. They were probing the lines in silence now, listening for return fire, trying to locate weak spots, and they weren't alone anymore. "We've got infrared signatures on the ridge across from us," Basri whispered, squinting at his thermal tablet. 3 at least, possibly more. Not moving fast, but definitely moving. "Range?" Hale asked. "Within 300 meters. Probably recon. They're scanning our pattern." "Let them watch," Hale muttered. His voice didn't shake. It never did. Even when the odds were as lopsided as they were now, a few hours earlier, the SEALs had burned their final radio, burst up the chain, one more plea for air support, evacuation, anything. The response was immediate and useless. Assets unavailable. Priority coverage elsewhere. Hold position. We'll reassess at dawn. That was it? A flat, cold dismissal. Hale had stared at the message for a few seconds longer than usual. He didn't curse. Didn't punch the rock wall behind him. He simply gave a quiet, bitter laugh and shook his head. "Fob said no," he told the others. "No." One replied. There wasn't anything left to say. Now. In the silence of that cold mountain trench, the team prepared to go longer. Longer without food. Longer without rest. Longer without dying. Renner crouched beside him, checking a claymore they'd rigged to the approach trail. "We should pull back to the fallback, he said. "Echo's compromised. Too much visibility. We're silhouetted against the sky." Hale shook his head. "We pull back. We lose elevation. We lose sight. We lose tactical control." "We already lost control," Renner muttered. "I said we hold." Renner gave a quiet grunt of approval. The chief had earned his trust over years, and it still held even now. Suddenly, movement. Quiet too quiet. A rustle, maybe 20 meters. DOWNCLOPE. And another. Basri swung his suppressed rifle around. Movement left, close, real close. "Wait for confirmation," Hale said. He watched. He didn't breathe. Then a single, careless step of fighter kicked loose a rock. It tumbled down. Renner fired. Pop. Pop. 2 flashes of white through NVG. 2 targets down. But now they were lit. The trap had been sprung. Rat. Tat. Tat. Automatic fire erupted from 3 directions. AKs ripped across the slope, shattering stone and rattling their cover. Sparks flew. Bullets hissed past their heads like wasps. Ortiz, still bandaged, returned fire with a burst from his M249. The recoil vibrated through the ground as brass rained. Into the dust. Multiple hostiles. Northwest flank. Basri shouted, ducking low. Another RPG fired, this time too close. Boom! The explosion knocked debris into the air. Hale tasted grit and blood. His ears rang. Basri was down, arm bleeding, but conscious. Hale dragged him to cover with one hand and kept firing with the other. The SEALs were in a full firefight, outnumbered, outgunned, and out of time. Firing discipline. Hale shouted over comms, "Pick your shots, conserve ammo." They obeyed, falling into the rhythm of controlled defense. For every burst from the enemy, the SEALs answered with precision. They dropped 3 more fighters in the next 5 minutes, but it felt like a drop in the ocean. Renner crawled over with a fresh mag and a dry tone. "We're going to run out of bullets before they run out of bodies." "They're not pushing." "Hard," Hale noted. They're dragging this out. They want to tire us. Ortiz wiped blood from his lip and looked at the night sky. Maybe they're waiting for something. Reinforcements. Or ... Daylight. Hale looked at his watch. 2:47. Dawn was still hours away. They had to last. Basri groaned, applying another dressing to his bleeding arm. You think Command's even watching our last GPS ping? Hale didn't answer. He was thinking about the FOB, probably overwhelmed, under pressure, juggling a dozen active missions. On paper, Hale's team wasn't even supposed to be in direct conflict. They were a recon op. Small footprint, silent dot, and in the brutal calculus of battlefield priorities, 6 elite operators holding a worthless ridge in the middle of a cursed valley didn't rank very high. He didn't blame Command, but he was done expecting help. Hale crawled over to the team. Here's the deal, he said quietly. They're trying to bleed us out. We let them. Let them think we're softening. Then, when they get cocky and charge, we kill every one of them. Renner finished. Exactly. They nodded. They understood the odds. But they also understood the mission had changed. It wasn't about the weapons cache anymore, or the observation objective. It was about staying alive. Each minute they held this ground forced the enemy to burn resources. Time, ammo, fighters. Even in defeat, there was purpose. The quiet returned, broken only by the soft rustle of wind. Occasionally, a shot rang out in the distance, testing, baiting. The SEALs didn't answer. They waited. Every heartbeat was loud, every breath heavy. But still they waited. And somewhere in the stillness of that black valley, when hope was thinnest and the world had turned its back, something unexpected happened. A low rumble. Faint, distant, but growing. Hale blinked. His ears perked. It wasn't a mortar, not thunder. It was. Renner looked up suddenly, eyes wide. Is that a jet? No, Hale whispered, rising slightly. That's an A-10, and it was getting closer. The sound began as a murmur in the distance, barely distinguishable from the wind that curled through the valley. It vibrated subtly through the dirt, like the grumble of something vast and ancient beneath the mountain skin. Senior Chief Marcus. Hale held perfectly still, eyes narrowed, ears straining against the darkness. His first instinct was disbelief. There was no way it could be what he thought it was. Not here. Not after the FOB had made it painfully clear. No support was coming, and yet ... The rumble deepened. Renner's head tilted like a wolf catching the scent of prey. You hear that? I do, Hale replied. Ortiz rolled over, bloodied and exhausted. It can't be. Command said, I know what I'm hearing. Hale cut in, because he did. You didn't forget that sound once you heard it. It wasn't the sleek hiss of a fast mover like an F-16. It was slower, meaner, angrier. A deep-throated engine. Noise that sounded like someone had bolted a tractor engine to a chainsaw and turned. Both up to max. It was an A-10 Thunderbolt II, the WARTHOG, and it was headed straight for the dead V. For a moment, no one spoke. The team just listened, letting that low, unmistakable growl grow louder. Hope flickered behind the exhaustion in their eyes. Who the hell sent it? Basri asked, voice cracking. No idea, Hale said. And right now, I don't care. The sound was coming fast now, echoing across the mountains. The enemy below must have heard it too, because everything changed. Flashlights winked out. Movement stilled. The rhythm of the night broke like a snapped bone. The warthog was near. Then came the cannon. B R R R R R R R R R R R R R R T. The valley exploded in light and fire. The GAU-8 Avenger, a 30 mm rotary cannon, the size of a Volkswagen, erupted from beneath the A-10's nose, unleashing a storm of depleted uranium rounds down the mountainside. Sparks ignited. Rocks shattered. The Taliban fighters below were torn apart in an instant. From Hale's vantage, it looked like a god had just drawn a white-hot blade across the earth. Target, left flank. 2 trucks. Renner shouted. The A-10 banked low, nearly scraping the ridgeline. Its engines roared past like thunder from the old world. Then it came around again. B-R-R-R-R-T got another sweep. Another surgical cut through enemy ranks. Explosions lit up the valley. The Taliban forces, once so coordinated, were now in full retreat, scattering like rats. The SEALs didn't fire a shot. They didn't have to. The Hog was doing all the talking. Hale watched through his NVGs as a group of fighters ran across the lower trail. The A-10 saw them too. A short pause, then 2 precision bombs dropped from its wings. Hale flinched as the explosions hit with bone-rattling force. One of the ridge trails collapsed, sending smoke and bodies into the abyss below. Basri laughed, a sharp and unhinged sound. That's not just support, that's vengeance. Renner stared, eyes wide. We didn't even call that bird in. We've had no comes for hours. I know, Hale said. Then what the hell is it doing here? Hale didn't answer, because the truth was, he didn't know. The A-10 made a final pass, hovering over the valley like a hawk circling prey. Then it angled toward the north and began climbing, slowly disappearing into the darkness as its roar faded into nothing. No radio check-in. No call sign. No ID. Nothing. It had come. It had destroyed everything in its path, and then it had left. Basri's radio hissed softly. He twisted the dial, trying to lock in. Still nothing from command, he reported. That bird never checked in with anyone. Not on our channel. Not on the Air Force net. There's no record. Renner rubbed his temple. So what? We just got saved by a ghost? Hale finally sat back, his knees aching, adrenaline still pumping through every vein. He looked down at the carnage below. Dozens of fighters gone. Mortar destroyed. RPG teams vaporized. Trucks burning. Whatever plan the enemy had died in those 2 minutes of fury. And still, Hale didn't smile, because none of this made sense. Status check, he said finally. Ortiz is stable, Basri sighed, nodding at the heavy gunner, who was pale but conscious. Shrapnel wounds sealed. No sign of infection. Renner was already reloading mags from fallen enemies. We're low, but still armed. Enough for another fight if it comes. Hale took a deep breath and looked back over the ridge. Let's hope it doesn't. There was no more movement in the valley. The Taliban force had either been obliterated or had fled into the dark. The air was thick with smoke and scorched earth. The SEALs stayed alert, but no new enemy appeared. They'd survived the night, but not alone. As dawn painted the eastern sky in grim streaks of ash and violet, Hale finally radioed the FOB again. This time, the signal went through clearly. Bravo. 01. Ridge position secure. Multiple hostiles neutralized. Requesting immediate extraction. Confirm bird ETA. The response came quick. Copy that, Bravo. We had you flagged as no longer in contact. Extraction ETA 30. Confirm, how did you regain control of your sector? Hale paused. Ben spoke clearly. Unknown A-10 performed strafing run and neutralized enemy forces. Static. Then. Say again, Bravo. Hale repeated it. Command replied. No, A-10 was dispatched. All strike packages accounted for. Closest support bird was 2 provinces away and never left the tarmac. Silence followed. Then. came a new voice, calm, authoritative. Probably an officer. We'll discuss this further at debrief. Secure your wounded and prep for evac. Hawley clipped the radio to his vest and sat against a rock, finally allowing himself to relax. Just for a moment, Renner crouched beside him. So ... You believe in ghosts now, Chief? Hawley stared out over the valley. No, he said, but I believe someone's watching. The Black Hawk came in low and hot, 30 minutes after sunrise. Its blades churned up ash, dust, and fragments of spent shell casings that hadn't yet cooled. The valley was quieter now. The violence from the night before had burned itself out, leaving behind nothing but charred craters and broken bodies. Senior Chief Marcus Hawley stood watch as the bird touched down on a makeshift LZ. The rotors beat like a war drum. The seals moved quickly, silent, tight, automatic. Basri helped Ortiz to the bird, one arm around his shoulder. Renner pulled rear security, rifle raised, scanning the RIDG. ELINE. Was the last to climb in. He didn't look back at the valley. He didn't have to. He could still hear it, like it had soaked into his blood. The screaming metal. The endless thunder. The roar, not just from the A-10, but from the earth itself. From the fight. From the fact that no one should have made it out alive. Yet here they were breathing. They arrived at FOB Talon, a hardened outpost surrounded by rusting HESCO barriers and barbed wire, hidden in a forgotten part of Afghanistan that hadn't made the news in years. The commanding officer, Lieutenant Colonel Bradstone, met them on the tarmac with a clipboard, a frown, and zero patience. You were in direct engagement? He asked Hawley the moment boots hit concrete. Hawley didn't salute, just nodded. Under sustained contact for 10 hours. Took casualties, multiple confirmed enemy kills. Bradstone flipped through a report. According to the op brief, you were strictly recon. No contact expected. No air support scheduled. I didn't schedule the enemy either, Hawley replied. Coolly. The colonel didn't smile. Then explain the reports we've got from 3 different monitoring posts. They picked up an A-10 strike package in your sector last night, unauthorized. No transponder, no mission file, no comms. Just came in hot, dropped fire, and vanished. You're welcome, Renner muttered under his breath. Bradstone turned to him, expression ice cold. This isn't a joke, operator. Renner shrugged. Wasn't laughing, sir. Inside the debrief room, the lights were too bright, and the coffee tasted like chemicals. The team sat shoulder to shoulder, sweat dried into their uniforms, eyes bloodshot. The aftershock hadn't worn off. A JAG officer sat at the far end of the table. Not a good sign. Bradstone cleared his throat. We need a detailed accounting of what happened from 1900 to 0600. I want GPS tracks, targeting logs, visual confirmation of the aircraft, comms, transcripts, everything. Hawley looked him dead in the eye. There are no transcripts. We never spoke to the pilot. He didn't call in. He didn't respond. He just showed up. The JAG officer leaned forward. Are you saying this aircraft entered a U.S. combat zone and performed close air support without any clearance? I'm saying that's exactly what he did, Hawley said. And without him, we'd be dead. For an hour, the team gave their testimony. Basri brought up his thermal readouts. Renner drew a rough flight path of the A-10's approach and exit. Hawley described the cannon fire, the impact zones, and the precision of the strikes. No fratricide, he said. Not even close. This guy didn't just know how to fly. He knew where to fire, when to fire, and exactly how close he could cut it. I've seen air support. I've worked with it. This guy was different. The JAG officer leaned back, clearly frustrated. And yet, we have zero record of any Thunderbolt in the AO. not just from our end, but from the Air Force. That's not just irregular, it's impossible. Tell that to the casing in my bag, Renner said, tossing a dented 30mm round. Onto the table. Pulled it out of the dirt next to my head this morning. You think I brought that from home? Eventually, the officers left the room. The SEAL sat in silence for a while, processing. Basri peeled off his bandage. Ortiz chewed slowly on an energy bar. No one spoke. Finally, Renner broke the quiet. So what now? They gonna pretend it never happened? Halle didn't look up. They won't admit it, not officially. They'll bury it in red tape and plausible deniability. Even if it saved 6 American lives? Especially because it saved 6 American lives. Later that afternoon, Hall found himself alone in the base chapel. He wasn't religious, not in the way some of the others were. But there was a peace there, in the quiet hum of the air conditioner and the dust on the pews. He sat in the back and pulled the 30mm casing from his pocket. It was scratched, hot in places where the sun had kissed it, and heavy dot, it wasn't just metal. It was a question that had no answer. A mystery. Flying on wings of steel. He turned it over in his hands. No serial number. No flight tag. No trace. Days later, back in the team's staging tent, Basri pulled Halai aside with a strange look on his face. I dug through back channels. Asked a friend at Kandahar to look into something. Into what? Ghost reports, rumors, whispers. Halai raised an eyebrow. Turns out we're not the first, Basri said. There are other teams, Rangers, Green Berets, even Marines, small ops. Remote regions. They get pinned. They get hit hard. Then something shows up. An A-10, never called, never logged, cleans house, disappears. You're saying this happens often? I'm saying this happens enough to have a nickname. Basri lowered his voice. They call it the ghost hog. Halle didn't respond immediately. He just stared at the floor for a long moment. He thought of the silence before the roar. The sudden, brutal precision. The absence of explanation afterward. Then he nodded. Let them call it what they want, he said. What do you call it? Basri asked. Halle stood, walking toward the tent flap. I call it someone who gave a damn. When no one else did. It started with a name. A whisper passed from one operator to another in a dark corner of the FOB. Not official, not even spoken aloud at the debriefings, just murmured like some old war myth. Viper. Basri heard it first. He brought it to Halle with a skeptical smirk. Apparently the Ghost Hog's pilot has a name, he said. They call him Viper. Halle raised an eyebrow. That a call sign? More like a legend. No one knows who he is. No service record. No squadron tie-in. Just shows up in an A-10. It doesn't exist, drops death, and vanishes into the dark. Halle leaned forward. You believe it? Basri hesitated. After what we saw? I don't know what I believe anymore. But this guy, he's not just a ghost. He's a shadow inside the system. 3 nights later, Halle found himself invited to a forward ops trailer by someone he didn't know. The message was unsigned, typed, and left on his bunk. It simply said, if you want to know who saved your team, come alone. 200. Ops trailer 4. He considered ignoring it. Then he didn't dot at 0155. He was outside trailer 4. The air was dry and still, the moon low, the FOB quiet. He knocked once. The door creaked open. Inside was an aging Air Force tech, alone, drinking instant coffee from a stained mug. No name on his uniform, no rank displayed. You're Marcus Hall? The man asked without looking up. I am. You led the SEALs pinned in Dead V last week? I did. Good. Sit down. The trailer was lined with monitors, radar screens, and flight logs that flickered with data. Halle, couldn't begin to interpret. The tech reached for a folder beside him, old, dog-eared, unofficial dot. He slid it across the table. Inside were 2 photographs. One of an A-10 burnt gray, no tail markings. Its fuselage patched in places that didn't match. No squadron insignia. No call sign. The second was a grainy cockpit shot. A man in a helmet. Face obscured. Visor black. But across the side panel, written in faded white stencil, were 3 letters VPR. Viper, the text said. That's the closest anyone's ever come to identifying him. Hale stared at the photo. This isn't Air Force sanctioned. Not anymore, the tech replied. According to the man, the pilot known as Viper had once been part of a Black Ops squadron unofficially tied to JSOC Joint Special Operations Command. Years ago, during the height of Afghanistan's surge, he'd flown dozens of missions that no one claimed and no one recorded. Surgical strikes, rogue extractions, close air support where no support was authorized. Then he vanished, disappeared off the grid. Some said he quit. Some said he was court-martialed. Others whispered he'd died during a mission gone wrong one. The Pentagon buried. But every few years, when a team was about to be overrun in the middle of nowhere, the roar returned, the ghost hog. No one tracks him? Hale asked. The tech shook his head. He's not part of any known squadron. Doesn't respond to hails. Doesn't file flight plans. Best guess? He either hacked an old airframe, or someone is looking the other way. Why? The tech looked up for the first time, his face tired. Because sometimes, when the system breaks down, you need someone outside the system to keep people alive. Hale absorbed that in silence, then asked, Why tell me? The tech stood. Because he saved your team. And because you're not the type to run to command and file a report. You understand ghosts. You've been in the dark. You know how rare light is when everything else goes black. Back in the tent, Hale relayed the story to his team. They sat in a tight circle, ears strewn around them, weapons resting nearby. Like loyal dogs. The talk was quiet. Not disbelief, but something close to reverence. Ghost Viper, Ortiz muttered. So he's real? Real enough to bleed, Renner said. But smart enough not to be caught, Basri smiled. And crazy enough to drop into a hot zone with no backup, no clearance, and no exit strategy. Hale nodded. Crazy or not, he saved our lives. A pause. Then Renner said, I want to meet him. Hale stared at him. Don't we all? The following day, the SEALs were assigned a temporary rotation to a command outpost in Bagram. Routine stuff refit, intel briefings, and boring Overwatch duties. But Hale suspected the transfer was more than coincidence. He knew how command operated. Quiet threats got moved. Dangerous truths got diffused. Ghost stories faded when their witnesses were scattered. But Hale didn't forget. Not the sound. Not the fire dot, not the blur of steel wings in the night. On the 3rd day at Bagram, Hale was walking across the tarmac when he heard it again, faint, distant, unmistakable. The roar, but not coming in, going out. He turned. There, far down the airstrip, barely visible in the morning haze, was a single A-10 rolling toward takeoff. No tail number. No escort. Just a streak of patched-up gray and a slow, deliberate taxi. The air traffic crew didn't wave. They didn't acknowledge it, as if it weren't even there. Hale jogged toward the control tower. Heart thumping inside. He found a young airman at the screen, watching the runway. What bird is that? Hale asked, pointing. The airman glanced. Then back at the radar. There's no bird on radar, sir. But it's right there. The airman turned, and Hale saw the truth in his eyes. He saw it too, but he wasn't allowed to say outside. A-10 hit the runway and roared forward. engines screaming like thunderclaps. Hale stepped into the sunlight, watching it lift into the air, banking left, disappearing into a sky painted gold by the rising sundot, and just before it vanished, the pilot dipped the wings, once smooth, like a salute. Hale stood still. He didn't wave back, but he smiled, because somewhere out there, in a world full of silence and shadows, the Ghost Viper still flew. Bagram was just another base on the map to most, just another checkpoint in a forgotten war. But to those who paid attention, the subtle shifts in atmosphere spoke volumes. One night after lights out, Hale was summoned to an off-grid tent near the northern edge of the base, far from the bustle of logistics. A grizzled CIA liaison, dressed in contractor khakis and looking like he hadn't slept since the Cold War, sat waiting with a cigarette between his fingers and a tablet in front of him. He didn't give a name, just nodded and tapped the screen. Tablet displayed a topographic map, marked with coordinates deep in the Hindu Kush. A red blinking dot pulsed faintly. "Unmarked strike last night," the man said. 5 confirmed enemy Kia. Compound flattened. No one called it in. Hale stared at the screen. Was it him? The man nodded slowly. Sane A. Single pass. Surgical. Minimal collateral. It's like watching an artist who only paints when nobody's watching. The next few days brought whispers, unconfirmed sightings of the Ghost Hog. Operators from other units began approaching Hale and his men discreetly, drawn by the quiet reputation they earned. A Ranger NCO approached Renner near the mess tent. "Really saw him?" Renner nodded. "Saw him. Heard him. Survived because of him." The Ranger shook his head, eyes wide. "I thought it was just a story we passed around to keep morale up." Ortiz, still nursing a fractured rib, smiled from the yawl. Sighed. "He's real. Just don't expect a selfie." The SEAL team's notoriety was growing, and with it, pressure from command. An internal review was quietly opened to investigate the unauthorized airstrike that saved them. While no official charges were leveled, the implications were clear. Heap. "Your mouth shut," a Navy intel officer advised Hale. "This whole thing? It's radioactive. The more you poke it, the more likely someone gets burned." But Hale couldn't let it go. Not because of obsession, but because deep down, he knew that if Ghost Viper was flying again, then someone somewhere was in even deeper trouble than they had been got, and he knew who'd end up in the middle of it. That moment came sooner than expected. 3 weeks later, an American signals team operating in Nuristan went dark. No comms, no pings. Just gone. ISR footage showed only smoldering equipment and a fading heat. Signature Trail 1 headed straight into Taliban-controlled territory. Command labeled it a lost asset, but to Hale, it looked like something else. A trap. He wasn't alone in thinking it. Basri brought him a flash drive containing intercepted chatter from Afghan militia radios. Hidden in the noise was a name. The pilot. It didn't take long to confirm it wasn't about just any pilot. They meant Viper. "They're not hunting Americans," Basri said. "They're hunting him." Hale stood silently. The implications weighed heavy. They're trying to bait the Ghost. Without permission, without orders, and with barely any prep, Hale assembled the team. They couldn't let Viper walk into a kill zone unaware. Not when they owed him their lives. Not when every instinct told them the enemy was setting up something bigger. Their plan was improvised. Drop into the mountains under radio silence, scout the trail left behind by the signal team, and confirm if enemy elements were laying a trap. No one told command. No one asked permission. Sometimes, ghosts have to hunt their own. Under cover of night, the SEALs were dropped 30 clicks from the last known coordinates of the signal team. The terrain was brutal high-altitude cliffs, jagged paths, razor-thin ridgelines. They moved silently, darkness their only friend, They reached the burnt-out equipment by dawn. No bodies. No blood. Just bait. They faked a team, Renner whispered. Crouching over a staged radio. Ortiz looked up from the hillside with binoculars. Got movement east. 2 trucks. Technicals. No friendlies. Basri frowned. It's a snare. And then the hum. Faint. Familiar. They turned skyward in unison. Far off, circling like a bird of prey, was an unmistakable shape against the rising sun. An A-10. Viper was coming. Should we call him off? Basri asked urgently, unslinging his radio. Hale shook his head. He doesn't answer radios. He doesn't need to. Renner was already laying out claymores. Then we do what he did for us, we cover him. They set up an ambush, positioning themselves along the slope where the enemy vehicles were rolling into an ideal firing lane. It was clear the insurgents expected Viper to dive in and get close too close. They were ready with man-pads and heavy-caliber machine guns. But what they didn't expect was the SEALs. The trucks rolled in, gunners braced, triggers readied, and then the sky screamed. The A-10 came in low and fast, not from the east, as expected, but from the north, hugging the terrain like a knife. He didn't give them time to blink. BRRRRRRRRTTTTT. The first 30 millimeters burst, shredded the lead technical, flipping it like a toy. The second burst erased the rear vehicle, scattering bodies into smoke. Then came the SEALs. Rifles cracked. Claymores exploded. Chaos reigned. The enemy never stood a chance. Minutes later, it was over. Bodies smoked in the morning chill. The trap was obliterated. And above them, the A-10 banked left again. But instead of vanishing, it circled back. Slower. Lower. The cockpit. Passed just overhead. And this time, the canopy was open just enough to see the pilot inside, visor down, flight suit worn, one gloved hand lifted in a sharp, unmistakable salute. Hale returned it. And for the first time, Viper spoke. A single crackling transmission bled through the team's comms, low and distorted. Det paid. Then silence. Back at base, command was furious. Unauthorized deployment. Unlogged engagement. Collateral risk. Hale sat through another debriefing, surrounded by officers who'd never fired a shot in anger. But this time, the team didn't flinch. They had no regrets. Later that night, as they sat under a pale moon, Ortiz leaned back and said what they were all thinking. He knew. Basri nodded. He knew they were baiting him. He came anyway. Renner smiled. Because that's what he does. Hal sat quietly, looking up at the stars. They call it the unseen war. But maybe the real war's been invisible the whole time. Fought by ghosts. Men who don't exist. Keeping the rest of us alive. No one spoke after that. They didn't have to. 2 weeks passed. The mountain ambush was deemed resolved, but the ripples were far from settled. Hawley and his team returned to low-profile operations, while command buried the after-action reports under classified tags and black ink. No mention of Ghost Viper. No mention of the A-10. That wasn't supposed to exist. The war machine rolled on like it always did. But Hawley kept watching the skies. Then came the message. A scrambled burst transmission intercepted by a friendly recon drone. Somewhere near the Pakistani border. No voice, no words. Just coordinates. The source? Untraceable. The content? A location in the spin. Gar range? Deep, cold, hostile. And it wasn't addressed to command. It was addressed to Team 13. Hawley knew what it meant. Viper was calling them. One last time. They moved without ceremony. Just a small footprint deployment. Under the guise of a communications relay repair. Hale, Renner, Ortiz, Basri, and 2 support operators who didn't ask questions. The Black Hawk dropped them on a narrow ridge under the cover of fog. Visibility was low. Radios static heavy. A bad omen wrapped in silence. They hiked 6 clicks to the coordinates, expecting a burned-out compound or a downed bird. What they found instead, was a wreck. The A-10 was half buried in the snow, broken, against the mountain rock like a fallen giant. Its wings were scorched, tail nearly torn off. Smoke still whispered from the fuselage, but it wasn't a fresh crash. It had happened days ago. Holly approached carefully, eyes scanning every direction. BASRI followed, whispering, "No bullet holes. No anti-air burns. This wasn't shot down." Renner crouched near the wreck. "Looks like he landed it." Ortiz frowned. "You can't land an A-10 in the mountains." "Unless you had to." Holly muttered. Inside the cockpit, the canopy was shattered. No pilot, just a set of boot prints leading away into the snow. They followed the trail for hours. Guns up, senses razor-sharp. The boot prints led into a narrow gorge, down into a ravine, and finally into a cave half hidden behind a jagged outcrop of ice and stone. It wasn't deep, just a hollow with old survival gear, half-eaten rations, and a space blanket still warm. And there lying against the stone was Viper, helmet off, beard short but wild, flight suit torn, his left leg wrapped in a crude splint. He didn't flinch when they approached. He just smiled. "Took you long enough." They stared at him in stunned silence. It was the first time any of them had seen his face. Not what they expected. No Hollywood jawline, no mythical aura. Just a man mid-40s, weathered eyes, tired grin. The kind of face you'd pass on a crowded street and never remember. Holly stepped forward. "You sent the signal?" Viper nodded. "I figured if anyone come, it'd be you." "Why crash here?" Basri asked. "Didn't crash," he said. "Engine failure. Got clipped back near the border. No fuel to get home. This was the best place to disappear." Renner exhaled. "You were gonna die out here." "Yeah," Viper said. "But not without a fight." They stabilized his leg and prepped an extraction call. Viper insisted they wait until nightfall, less chance of detection. Until then, they built a fire and huddled in silence. Holly finally asked the question that had hung between them for weeks. "Why do you keep coming back?" Viper didn't answer at first, just stared into the fire. Then, softly, "I used to fly for the 74th, Moody Air Base. Been black contract work. They sent me to places even God doesn't visit. I saw teams get left behind. Men screaming for air. Support that never came. Red tape, politics, logistics. Always a reason why we were too late." He looked up, eyes sharp. "So I stopped asking. Took an old bird, rewired the systems, found people who could make me invisible, and I just started listening, waiting, for the guys who had no backup." Ortiz swallowed hard. "You became your own QRF." Viper smirked. "Something like that." They asked his real name. He didn't answer. Didn't need to. Because at that moment, Ghost Viper wasn't a name anymore. He was a symbol. Of every forgotten operator, every unheard radio call, every mission that went sideways and still deserved to be saved. And for one quiet night, the legend sat beside the men he had rescued. Just another soldier, trying to do what was right in a world that rarely rewarded it. The extraction bird arrived just before dawn. The SEALs helped Viper aboard, careful with his leg. He grunted but didn't complain. As they lifted off, the mountains receded behind them, cold, silent, eternal. Hal sat across from him, watching as the older man closed his eyes. Not from pain, but peace. For the first time in years, the ghost could rest. Back at Bagram, medical teams took Viper in, but no reports were filed. No photos, no official debrief. Halle made sure of that. The Airbus's systems showed only a vague medevac unidentified, patient with frostbite, and a fracture. No name. No origin. Nothing to trace. 2 days later, the man known as Viper was gone. Discharged. Disappeared. Like smoke. Week after that, Halle found something strange in his bunk. A flight patch. Old. Faded. Black and gray. At the center was an A-10 silhouette, flanked by wings and a single word embroidered beneath it. VP or no note. No explanation. But he understood. Back. In Konus, Halle and his team rotated out for a brief break. Rest. Families. Breathing room. But on the first night home, he stepped out into his backyard and looked up at the stars. Somewhere out there, maybe in some other country, maybe under a different name, maybe flying a bird with no records. Ghost Viper still flew. Or maybe he didn't. Maybe ghosts don't need to fly forever. Maybe they just need to be remembered. End.